it's wonderful to have the Salish Sea writers community here. I would just ask you to raise your hands, those of you who are in Margie's class. This is called nourishment. This is called support. And then some from the morning class who are here, raise your hand. Oh, good. Our resident poet. So I have been working with Margie for about 5 years.
A little more.
A little more. And often I tell people, because I've been teaching memoir for a long time and have written 2 memoirs, that it will take 5 years, and that scares off a lot of people. But Margie has such great talent and perseverance, and dealing with this very difficult subject, there's a grace about her book, as you can see, a tenderness, and also an unswerving look at what it's like to be a sibling of someone with autism. So the question I would love to ask, and then we're going to have some questions from the audience and from her co-writers. How was it, Margie, to move from being an NPR reporter, where you actually reported on things like childhood depression and, you know, all sorts of award-winning journalism, to writing first-person I?
Yeah. It was a huge leap for me. I had to learn, and I knew I was a beginner, and I really had to learn how to step onto the page, which of course, as a journalist, you're taught completely not to do. You're taught to step back and look at both sides and put them both down and let the reader decide everything. And in memoir, I actually first thought that this was a book about my brother, but I learned soon that it was a book about me. Memoir is not about another person, it's you. And you have to be willing to come forward and be the narrator. So in a way, you have to be willing to tell the story. And that's, some of it is really hard, because you're talking about people that you know, and you're talking about your family and people that are really alive. They're not fictional characters. So for me, that took a lot of time working through the chapters, but knowing actually the only way that I really could get it down on paper was just to write it as if no one was ever going to read it, and it would end up in my bottom drawer. And even then, the writers that I trusted, thank goodness they were around me, they would ask me to go deeper. And they would point out, what about this, what about that? And I'd have to go back and open it up again. So in that way, it actually was a learning process for me, both writing skill, but a lot of it was epiphanies and surprises came up as the process itself was happening. So it's not like anything completely was something I hadn't realized or thought of, but there was a lot more work that I had to do to put myself in the story, and especially to put humor in the story, which I started out with none of that. So they pushed me hard on that, and I found my way to that.
So when you start, how many of you all are interested in writing memoir? How many people? Oh, good. We have a memoirist here. So when you're creating a character of the self on the page, oftentimes you say I, and you assume that the reader knows who I is. But in fact, you have to create a character of Margie, or a character of Brenda, or a character of Lindsay, or a character of Treely. And in creating that character, there's a sense of being exposed and very vulnerable. So one of the things that I have taught is to sidestep the self. And I've written about this a lot in the teaching memoir book called Your Life is a Book, that I wrote with my agent, who is also Margie's agent. And what you do is you decide what you will not share. We were talking about that in class on Monday, where you might have had an abortion, but that's not relevant to a poem, or that's not relevant to a section you're writing about your brother. And so you can say, here is the character of myself crafted on the page, and then here is me, and I am private and I am safe, because I've decided what not to put on the page, and that gives you freedom. So the same thing happened with Margie, yes? There were things that we were pushing her for, you remember? you might want to say, but you don't have to say it because it's private. In fact, don't say. But how was it for you when we pushed you? Because we are a pushy group, and we ask a lot of questions.
Well, I mean, I knew I had to enter this writing differently than I had before. So I was sort of prepared to be pushed. But again, you know, if I thought of it any other way, if I thought of anybody looking at it too soon, and I did, I kept it very private for a long time until I got most of it down on paper, because I needed that privacy. I knew the editor would be right here very quickly if I started thinking about anyone who might read this that I know.